mile-an-hour winds expected when it gets there, then to 40, 35, and 30 off toward Tennessee. So it's beginning to weaken a bit. Here are the actual winds that we're observing, and these are sustained winds, which are significant. I mean, 48 mile-an-hour winds at Port Arthur and Lake Charles. That's certainly tropical storm force, but it's not 100 mile-an-hour winds or even 90 mile-an-hour winds. 21 in Lafayette, 29 in Galveston. But look at this. You can see the gust here, 81 in Port Arthur, Lake Charles at 79, and 47 in Lafayette. So some pretty good hurricane gusts are certainly happening there at Lake Charles and Port Arthur, so they're dealing with that. In the meantime, Galveston 78 with a northwest wind at 29. Got a little sunshine here in Houston, what's left of it. 82, a north wind at 16. So the north winds are bringing the temperatures down a little bit, upper 70s, but the dew points more than anything in the 60s. Feels awfully nice. It's going to be a fairly nice evening and a nice one to wake up to. There's a look at the wind speeds, 29, 20, 22, 20 in Pearland, and you can see the wind gusts to 41, 45. So it's still breezy out there. The good news is these winds are going to continue to diminish as we go into the evening hours and especially as we go overnight. That's always good news, especially for the coastal areas where we have seen a little back bay flooding now. Crash Boat Basin, which is off of Offutt's Bayou, has a little bit of high water there because of this back bay issue. I know Justin Staples has been watching it all evening long. Justin, what you got?
Yeah, I'm not shocked that we were starting to see that. We kind of figured that would be the case, and obviously at Offutt's Bay, same thing with Laura. Obviously, Frank mentioned earlier, we were talking at this early 6 o'clock hour here is that it wasn't as strong as the push we were getting with Laura. So let me give you updated on what we're seeing over in Louisiana. I just checked a couple of different gauges, seeing some improvement there in Cameron, as Frank mentioned, towards Jennings. I agree with him. As soon as we go back to Jonathan, or at least now over the next 30 minutes to an hour, he's going to have a whole different story because he will be in the eye itself as it moves through. Interestingly enough, this intercoastal city freshwater canal locks gauge, I think, has gotten knocked out. It lost its, at least the barometer anyway. The winds basically went from about 70 miles an hour to nothing. And then I'm not getting any new information, so they may have some damage to that one. Getting a little closer to us here at home. Same story. Gauges have not changed much on either both Sabine Pass and, of course, as you get over across portions of the jetty. As Frank mentioned, that's what we're seeing is a little bit of a push in behind that there. And so I wouldn't be shocked to see a little more flood issue. But that said, these coastal flood warnings that the Weather Service originally had for 3 o'clock tomorrow, we've gotten word from them. They're going to drop those within maybe the next hour, as early or as late as 10 o'clock tonight, Frank. So some improvement with that for sure.
Well, we have a great weekend coming up. You see that 88, 92, a front on Tuesday. A front on Friday really cools us down for next weekend, and then next Monday is looking pretty good as well. It's looking a little better, I'm hearing, where Jonathan is. We should probably head that way.
Let's find out. Jonathan Martinez live in Jennings tonight. Jonathan?
The wind's still pretty much whipping out here. The rain has let up a little bit. If you take a look over my shoulder there, it'll give you an idea of what it is that we're seeing out here. It does appear as if, as Justin just mentioned, that eye may be approaching us because it's not certainly as strong as it was maybe about 5 to 10 minutes ago. And it is a little eerie out here. We did see some more transformers go. It does appear as if some of the power is out, probably about a block or two down the road as well. But again, we've got a couple of down stop signs. Some of the trees out here have gone, but so far no real bad structural damage, at least not to report here from downtown Jennings. But again, we do know that a lot of people, according to law enforcement officials, took the opportunity to evacuate because, again, this is that 1-2 punch that they certainly didn't want in such a short amount of time. So that is what it is that we are seeing right now in downtown Jennings. Of course, we are expecting things to pick up once that eye wall passes over. But for now, we'll go ahead and send things back over to you guys.
Jonathan, we have about 1 minute left in this newscast. Does it look like the downtown area still has power? We're looking at those big lights. It looks like there's power on those. Have you seen any transformers blow, any big blue hues in the sky?
So in the immediate area on this block, we do still have power, but we did see some transformers go probably about a block to 2 over. We saw 2 or 3 different pops, and we did see that hue of blue along with green. And then what appears to be some of the power that did go out just off in the distance there, but it's kind of tough to bend around the corner because just how strong the wind goes. But we have seen at least 1 or 2, if not 3 transformers blow not too far down the road there, guys.
Okay, Jonathan Martinez live in Jennings, Louisiana tonight. We have a special presentation next right here on Channel 2. Straight Talk with the candidates. It starts at the top of the hour at 7 o'clock.
Meanwhile, our coverage of Hurricane Delta is going to continue online. We will continue these live reports of the storm at 7 o'clock. That's in just 2 minutes on click2houston.com. We'll see you there.
Welcome back, everybody. We are online this time. Hurricane Delta makes landfall as a Category 2 storm near Creole, Louisiana. That's just 14 miles east of Cameron, where Hurricane Laura made landfall just over 40 days ago.
The storm bringing heavy winds and rain to Louisiana, and we're even seeing some impacts in parts of our area. Here's a live look now at conditions in Lake Charles, Louisiana. A lot of wind and heavy rain there. We have our Brandon Walker in the Lake Charles area, just off of the 220 loop, showing us some already damage to homes, some siding being peeled off, debris on the streets. We'll check back in with him in just a little bit later.
Now, if we were to travel east by I-10, that'll take you right into Jennings, Louisiana, and this is the downtown area, and it looks remarkably different than it did just 30 minutes ago. The rain, it does appear, is still coming down at this hour, but it does appear that the winds have calmed down at least just a bit. The eye wall, the center of that eye wall, should be approaching that area and should be there quickly. When it happens, we will take you back there live because our Jonathan Martinez is standing by. Our extended edition of Hurricane Delta's landfall begins right now. Good evening once again. I'm Chris Gutierrez.
Hello, I'm Dominique Saxa. We're glad you're with us. We do want to get straight over to Chief Meteorologist Frank Billingsley.
Well, take a look at this. You mentioned Laura, which of course was just 6 weeks ago, and you can see how well formed that eye was as it moved onshore. They had 130-mile-an-hour winds in Lake Charles. Much different. It's been windy, some gusts to 74, 80-mile-an-hour winds in parts of Louisiana, but not a well-formed eye, not a well-structured system. A lot of dry air moved in, and that helped. Now, we did have this shot that we've been showing out of Sulphur, Louisiana. You can see the phone poles and the power lines that are down because these were new after Laura. So they were just put in. From what I understand, they could be pulled back up. So that's a help. Creole, Louisiana was the site for a landfall officially from the National Hurricane Center at about 6:10 this evening. It continues to move off to the north. So we have the reporters, Brandon's is in Lake Charles, Jonathan's in Jennings, Jay Gray's been in Lafayette. But you can see it's almost like this is a horizontal line of storms just moving to the north. Much improved in Lake Charles, as you saw, much improved in Jennings, a little better in Lafayette, but they've still got a go of it there. So this is the eye that's been moving up toward the north of I-10. I don't think, if you look to the south, that there's going to be a return of those heavy winds and rain. I know normally with a really tight eye, you'd see it on the north end, you'd have a break, and then you see it on the south end. But looking at the south end, there's not much to it. I think the worst has come and gone in places like Lake Charles and Jennings. It's still active into the Lafayette area, but that's only going to be probably for about another 45 minutes. Continues to push out of Texas, not completely gone. In fact, we've had some 81-mile-an-hour wind gusts there and some flood warnings that have continued. Look at these heavy rains, 9 and 10 inches right there along I-10. For the Houston area, hardly any rain to speak of. In fact, it's sort of a lovely evening shaping up. Officially 90-mile-an-hour winds, gusting to 125, a Category 1, north-northeast at 14. That will continue to push it toward Alexandria, then off into Mississippi and the Tennessee Valley over the weekend. In the meantime, the pattern for the rainfall follows exactly that track right through Alexandria. The heavy rain for us in the Beaumont area is out of here this evening, so we go into a fairly quiet weekend. Here's a look at some of the sustained winds as of 7 o'clock. 18, 48, 33, 26 miles an hour in Galveston, 22 at Hobby, with gusts, as I mentioned, 81, 79, 39. So hurricane force wind gusts are coming out of this system. So the wind is there, but it has mostly been a rainstorm more than anything else. 78 in Galveston with north-northwest winds at 26. Here in Houston, we have winds out of the north-northwest also at 14. So we continue to see temperatures going down this hour into the 70s, dew points in the 60s. We should wind up around 66 for an overnight low tonight. There are the winds. They continue, so it's still breezy and still gusting 44 miles an hour there in Galveston. The good news is the winds are beginning to die down. They'll continue to diminish as we go into the overnight into single digits. Tomorrow morning, wake up to really fairly quiet skies. So we're looking at the winds going down, which means surge and coastal issues should also be going down. Justin's been following that for the better part of the afternoon. Justin, what you got?
All right, well, I've got a big improvement on a lot of spots, including over towards Sabine Pass, just to the south of where our own Roseanne Aragon is, and of course over towards the North Jetty. They've both gone into the negative, and that means that that strong north wind on the backside of this storm is pushing all of that storm surge water back out into the Gulf of Mexico. So first, as Frank mentioned, Jonathan should be getting close to the eye wall here coming up very shortly. So the camera Cameron gauge there over right across when it goes in towards Cameron Lake. That's at now 2 feet. That topped out, if you were watching us earlier, at 4 o'clock. It was at 7 feet, so it's dropped 5 feet in, 3 hours now at this point. And as I feared, the gauge over towards Intercoastal City is gone, or at least got knocked out of commission anyway, because we've not had any updates over the last hour from that. And that is where it was interesting too, guys. We were talking about Jay Gray was over towards Lafayette. You notice he said he had a bit of a break, but then there was starting to see some of these bands set up. So he's kind of on the eastern fringe of where the eyeball, it's not very well defined, but you get the idea. Just nothing there, and that's headed right where Jonathan was. So we will see his shot in just a bit. Curious to see how that is changing as well. Both of those, Sabine Pass, North Jetty, as I mentioned, are continuing to have that water get pushed back out. That's good. The coastal flood warnings, I've not had any confirmation yet, although Weather Service has hinted to us they're going to drop those around 8 to 10 o'clock tonight. So as soon as I get new information on that, I will let you know. And so the impact for at least the coast, especially down around Galveston, still going to be about 30, 40 mile an hour winds. Those should slowly start to back off. Obviously, that means that not only the winds, but the tides are going to start falling as we get into the overnight high tides, and the surf is likely still going to be a little rough. As Frank has mentioned earlier, it's going to be a hot day tomorrow down around the coast and all of us here. So just be careful if you're headed on down. The rip current, I think, still will be on the strong side for Saturday. And I just saw this, and I want to put this together, guys, for a little bit of perspective. This is continental United States landfall storm since 1951. We've had 7 in about 6 years, 2002, 2005, 9 in 1916, and with this one today, we have hit the new record, 10 in 2020. That's about as 2020 as 2020 gets, if you want to know. Certainly is. All right, Frank, back over to you.
You know, this is an update on the flash flood warning situation in Texas. This is Jefferson County. It was to expire at 7. National Weather Service updated that, and now it's until 10 o'clock for those folks there. So that's not anything new as far as more rain. It's just the ongoing flooding that has continued there from this afternoon. So that has not subsided. This is some new stuff back along I-10 in the Lake Charles area. They have flood warnings until 1 in the morning. So it's still more a water storm than a wind storm.
All right. Thank you, Frank.
Jonathan Martinez should probably be getting very close to the eye wall about now. Is that right? Should be pretty calm. Is it getting better, Jonathan? Are you seeing any changes?
Just as, you know what, just as you're mentioning that right now, it is starting to die down right now. We pretty much don't have any rain out here. The wind is still a problem out here and proving to be a factor. We've been keeping a close eye on some of the trees out here, along with some of the power poles as well. They're still certainly whipping, but it is dying down a lot. The rain probably stopped, I'd say about a good 5 to 10 minutes or so ago. But we're in downtown Jennings, and of course we're getting those gusts right now here and there. But so far, nothing too terribly crazy out here. We did have a couple of awnings. If you take a look back on this side over here, you can see some of the awnings that came down across the street, and that's something that we were keeping a close eye on. We did have some of the poles that were connected to those awnings that had come down earlier, and obviously we had to make sure that didn't go anywhere in our general direction. A little bit further down the street, we also had some more awnings that came down earlier in addition to that stop sign. So far, the trees out here have held up in the area, but you can see that they're still tipped over, if you will. And again, they've got some more gusts that are coming and going right now, but the rain has certainly let up. It is nothing like we saw less than about, I'd say, a half an hour or so ago. Well, and there you got the gusts right there, and I guess it's back. Hang tight. So we'll come back this way, but yeah, it goes and it comes, and as you all had mentioned, the eye is approaching, if not almost directly over us, but it just goes and comes in spurts. But from what we've seen so far, just maybe a couple of transformers that have blown off in the distance, some awnings down here in the downtown area. We did hear earlier from perhaps one of the businesses down the way, we did hear some crashing of some sort of glass. We did try to go check it out. It doesn't appear as if any of the front of the businesses were damaged. That may have been just something that was inside. Not sure if perhaps they had some roof damage in the last hurricane that happened just 6 weeks ago, and maybe that's how perhaps some of the wind got in. But we weren't physically able to see where that the crashing glass came from, but we do know that it was not too far down the road, at least a half a block here in some of the immediate businesses. But thus far, just general assessment overall in the downtown area, not too terribly bad. We could tell you as we pulled into town, a lot of the houses did still have tarps on the roofs, also had some plywood up to cover the windows and doors and things of that nature. disaster, but we certainly didn't see the amount of debris here in Jennings like we saw out in Lake Charles or in Sulphur for that matter. We got out there just yesterday as well. So thus far, it does appear as if, at least just for the naked eye right now, the worst of this storm as it pertains to Jennings is over. But again, we do still get those pop of winds that burst every once in a while. So that is the very latest right now from Jennings, Louisiana. Guys, back over to you.
Jonathan, that little tree that you've been showing us, it's standing right next to you. I thought for sure that poor little tree was not going to make it today. It looks like a young tree, possibly something that was planted after Hurricane Laura. It's still standing. I have seen some debris flying around where there it is, that lucky little tree. We hope it remains. But what have you seen so far in terms of debris? Have you seen anything structural? I know you talked about hearing glass break down the road, but what have you seen fly by, and overall, what's your damage assessment there?
Structurally, everything does appear still to be sound, with the exception of that stop sign. We did see a smaller, like I said, the awning across the street and the awning down the road there. Past that, though, we haven't seen any major damage thus far to any buildings. You know, we saw when we were down in Cameron just yesterday and over in Lake Charles, we saw pieces of buildings that were missing. That's certainly nothing like what we're seeing out here in Jennings right now. In fact, they didn't even see that when Hurricane Laura blew through, because for them it was mainly just down power lines along with down trees. But right now, as it stands, as it pertains to Hurricane Delta, we are not seeing any type of major damage, at least not structurally, in the immediate area from where we are right now. And as you mentioned, that's kind of this little tree here. It's not a sapling because it's certainly a tree, but it's a younger tree. That's kind of been our gauge. But if you look across the street, there is another tree over there, and it's pretty much tipped over, but it's still hanging strong. Of course, we don't know how much longer that's going to last because the ground is saturated there. But those have been our indicators right now, just how bad things have gotten out here, at least as far as we're concerned here in this immediate intersection of downtown. But past that, we'll give you a shot of this awning over here. As we'll take a walk over here. This awning was the one that we were watching carefully earlier because it was flapping in the wind there. And if you take a look here on the ground, you can see the pole. This was part of one of the poles that was holding it up. There were a handful of these. This is a good 7 or 8 foot pole, and it's solid metal. So imagine, half a dozen of these holding up that awning there. At one point, we saw this whipping in the wind, and we, of course, alerted the folks inside, who they are one of the few that are still here, to say, hey, be mindful that you've got these giant poles that are whipping out here with the wind. And again, we're kind of in an alley, so we're not getting, earlier when those gusts were coming through, we weren't getting the whipping wind necessarily like we're getting on that side to that way. We didn't have too much coming this way, but it was definitely flopping in the wind there. And our biggest concern is we didn't want those poles to bust up against that glass and to have any of the structural damage. But if we take a walk down the street here, we haven't really seen anything. We could show you that across the street there is a building that does appear to have maybe a wall or two that was missing. But from what we were being told by the locals, that was some of the damage that happened during Hurricane Laura. But it's not the case like that across much of the city. But here in town specifically where we're at, not a lot of structural damage. Another indication of folks and what they were thinking was going to happen as far as preparations are concerned. If you take a look here at this right here, this is going to be a car collection like none other out here. And we had heard from some of the folks who also rent businesses down here. They said that the folks who own this particular garage, I guess you could say, actually owns a dealership across the street. They said that they felt that it wasn't going to be too terribly bad, so they went ahead and took the chance to leave the cars here. But as I said, there's easily $500,000 in cars in there, and if they felt like it was going to be much, much worse, they would have went ahead and evacuated and took those cars out. But again, as we take a walk down here, and again, this is the main little drag of Jennings, we are not seeing any of that major damage that we've seen in other places before. I do see something off in the distance there. I can't tell if maybe that's the glass that we heard earlier that had crashed. It's kind of tough to make out, but and again, it's tough to know if that was perhaps damage that was sustained during Laura or during Hurricane Delta right now. But for the most part, I would say structurally, my assessment of everything, at least here in the immediate area from where we're at, it doesn't look as bad as it potentially could have been. And folks around here are certainly thankful for that. Guys?
Hey, Jonathan, before we let you go, you mentioned earlier, and for those who may be just tuning into this online update, walk us through what you know about evacuations in that area. I know you've been dealing with and talking to the parish officials there.
Yeah, so when we got into town, of course, it was raining. That was earlier today, probably about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's the first place that we went. They have a police station set up where a lot of parish leaders were hunkered down, and they said, at this point, that window of opportunity to leave is no longer there. So obviously first responders were going to stay in town, but they did mention to us, and again, to give you just some perspective, this town or city is roughly about 10 to 12,000 people or so, and I asked him how many folks have evacuated, and the first thing he said, the good news is we would guesstimate at least half of them. So you're talking about maybe 6,000 to 7,000 people who went ahead and picked up and headed out of town just out of an abundance of caution because they didn't really know what to expect as it pertains to Hurricane Delta. But that was some good news that they said. And I can tell you that as we drove around for a couple of hours before we got here to downtown, we really didn't see anybody out here except law enforcement. We did see maybe 1 or 2. I think Rolando, photographer, had mentioned there were 1 or 2 that were, believe it or not, walking here. But law enforcement immediately told them, hey, you've got to go ahead and go. There is a mandatory evacuation order in place. So for the most part, we haven't seen a lot of people out here, which is good news in the middle of a hurricane. Guys?
Jonathan, thank you very much for your reporting and showing us a really good picture of what downtown Jennings looks like. We do have some housekeeping. The tropical storm warning has expired for southeast Texas.
That's right. Frank and Justin Stapleton, Eric Brate, they're all behind us here, working their sources and keeping an eye on things. Also, we've been passed this note that the Galveston ferry service is once again back on, so that's up and running as well. Our live team coverage continues now in the Port Arthur area. Our Roseanne Aragon is live there tonight. Roseanne, what are you seeing?
Yes, conditions are much calmer than when we last joined you about an hour ago. I'm joining you here with photojournalist Vladimir Mohet. Vladimir, please walk with me here. You can see the sun went down, so now it's very dark, but this is what is on the floor here. We have shingles, parts of roofs. We have debris all over the ground here. You can't tell right now, but just across this debris here is the Jefferson County Subcourt. Across the street from there, we are at the heart of Port Arthur City Hall. I want to show you where we've been covering the storm safely. We were lucky enough to have this shelter here just across the courthouse where we're keeping our lights and our equipment safe. I do want to kind of light this area as it's dark now there at night, and you can just see all of the debris that has covered the lawn of this area. Across the street in that darkness there, we've lost power across the street in Port Arthur. That right there is the Port Arthur City Police Department. We've seen transformers blown. The mayor of Port Arthur has issued a voluntary evacuation for those who live by the Sabine Path. And also Pleasure Island. I talked with a Jefferson County judge who says tonight at this hour, at least 41,000 residents are without power because of the heavy wind and rain, which earlier they predicted were tropical storm forces of 40 to 60 miles per hour. And we felt that as we felt the wall of the eye in our last live shot. It's hard to find places that are light, but all of the officials here are recommending that people stay inside their homes because of things just like this. All of the debris that has been put onto the roads because of unsecured trees, unsecured items, like we saw a construction cone that was rolling around earlier and debris from the ceilings. But again, residents here have stayed inside. I asked the Jefferson County judge how many people evacuated. He says, well, we didn't issue a mandatory evacuation because we do believe that the wind and the rain, that our area can handle that safely. So many people are home tonight listening to this, seeing the heavy wind and rain, and hopefully many people are safe. This is what it looks like here in Port Arthur. Reporting live from Port Arthur, Roseanne Aragon, KPRC Channel 2 News. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Roseanne. It looks like there's just going to be a debris field out there to pick up, just trees and minor things, but hopefully not too much. We did see some strong wind gusts from Port Arthur earlier tonight, not nearly as bad as what we saw in Louisiana. So a lot of that is generally superficial type damage.
Right. Let's get over to Lake Charles, Louisiana now, and that's where our Brandon Walker is. It looks like you're back in our Storm Tracker 2 news gathering, storm chasing vehicle. Walk us through what you are seeing there tonight.
Well, Chris, if only that were the case, we're actually still relying on cell phone technology. As I come a little closer to you, I'm going to take the flashlight from Renee and show you what we see right now, if that's of any help. It's pretty dark, it's pretty rainy, it's pretty windy. There is a hurricane here on the south side of Lake Charles. There are people who are still in this neighborhood right now. They're not outside, of course. We spent the day journeying around this neighborhood. It's fairly new on the south side of town, and flooding is a concern, but it does seem as though drainage is holding up. There was concern about an hour ago or so about a culvert here in the area, but that seems to be working. Now, there is a collection pit here in the area, and as you get closer to it, which you can't see right now because it is dark, there is some street flooding as you get out into that area. But as we walk out, actually I'm going to go back because I don't have a mic, and so because of the wind you can't hear me, so I'm under a carport. But anyway, the streets, at least where we are, if you can see, you probably can because I'm using a flashlight to illuminate. There is no street flooding where we are, but as you can see, things are coming down at a very steady clip as those winds pick up here in Lake Charles, on the south side of Lake Charles. Your geography south of the 210 loop. Let's send things back to you in Houston.
Well, I stand corrected. It looked like he was
in the storm
tracker with that kind of selfie shot, but right. No, it's just the dead of night there behind him there. So we've got some videos that we want to show you now. Take a look at this first one. Yeah,
a howling wind, sounds of wind in Sweet Lake, Louisiana, just north of Creole. That's where Delta made landfall. This video was posted to Twitter earlier this evening. Folks there lost power, but they've got a generator, so they're lucky and in very good shape, and we thank them for providing this footage. Yeah, take a look at this shot here. It's a herd of cattle there, caught in the winds as Hurricane Delta approaches the Louisiana coast. This is in the Louisiana, that's like, I think, near Vermilion Parish, yeah. Southeast of Jennings, where Jonathan Martinez is tonight. And Frank, when we were, looking at these videos, and I pulled up on the old Google Maps to see where exactly Creole, Louisiana is, where it made landfall. It looks like the vast majority of that area is kind of wetlands and marsh area. Oh, it's a wildlife refuge. Yeah. From about Creole to all the way to Vermilion Bay. There's maybe 3 little towns there, and I'm sure they're evacuated. Right. I would think. But, right. If it's going to hit anywhere in Louisiana, that was the best place for it to hit. Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. Yep. And at least it didn't go directly over Cameron and directly into Lake Charles. Exactly. Yeah, and as we saw, even the cattle were trying to seek shelter. Sometimes it pays to eat a lot and have your center of balance. Very true. Trying to get through. Try and push me over. Yeah. Hey, look, it's Friday Night Lights. That it is. I know. This is Deer Park, Abshire Stadium. So a bit of a cloudy one, but they're not going to let it upset them. There's Creole right there. There's Cameron. This is what you're talking about, all this area here, Chris. That's all, once you get up here to Guyton, I'm sure I didn't say that right, because I've never pronounced the Louisiana town the correct way. But that's just about all that was wildlife refuge. And look at this. Here's Lafayette. They're finally, I think Jay Gray is there, and I think he's finally seeing the rains begin to diminish. I know Jonathan Martinez is, and Lake Charles, it's beginning to go down also. A little wider shot there. This eye is not going to have a big southern end that comes through the area. I think what we see here is what we get. That continues to push north at about 14 miles an hour, so that'll move on out of here. Flash flood warnings for Texas till 10, parts of Louisiana until 1, just because it's ongoing. Look at the heavy rains they've had. Now we're getting beyond 10 inches of rain there on I-10. So very heavy rains more than anything. You've seen the wind. That's easy to see. The rain is a little harder to see, but I can promise you there's going to be some flood issues there around Lake Charles because of that. This is a Cat 1, 90-mile-an-hour winds gusting to 125. It's moving off to the north-northeast at 14 miles an hour. So that takes it through the state, across Mississippi, and into Tennessee by the time we get to Sunday. The rain shield will follow that. So all of the rain gets out of our state by midnight tonight and then continues to move off through Louisiana by Saturday morning. It'll generally be on out of there. So it's a fast-moving storm, which helps. The winds with it, 21, 48, 28 in Port Arthur, 26 in Galveston. It's been a bit of a mess in Galveston. You've had a lot of heavy rain earlier, a lot of winds. The wind continues. It'll start to come down, but you still have 44-mile-an-hour wind gusts, 55 in Port Arthur, 79 in Lake Charles, and 51 in Lafayette. So it's a breezy storm, not nearly like Laura was, but enough to bring in some issues with power, obviously. 26-mile-an-hour sustained winds in Galveston. Here in Houston, it's fairly quiet. We've got a strong wind at 14, or a moderate wind
wind anyway, 79. So there's a look. 26 is the highest at the coast, which is what you would expect, and the gusts there at 44. 29 at Hobby, 23 at Pearland, 22 at Hobby. So if you're Tomball, I should say. So if you're in a high-profile vehicle, be careful if you're driving around tonight. Things will continue to diminish. Once we get to 9 o'clock, we're down around 14, 15 miles an hour. By 1 in the morning, 8, 12, single digits overnight, and a quiet Saturday. In fact, it's going to be a hot but pretty nice weekend. Those winds coming down means that the water in places, especially along the coast, will come down. Justin's been watching that. Any improvement there?
Yeah, definitely some improvement. In fact, I just got fresh numbers in Cameron. They're now under a foot, so they have dropped almost 6 feet of water in about 3 hours at this point. So really amazing to see just how fast that storm surge can move in, and then once that ire, the center of the storm itself, moves out, that water just gets pushed right back out into the Gulf of Mexico. So that is the case. As Frank mentioned, yeah, Lafayette looks like they're getting a little bit of a break. Jonathan should start seeing the same thing as well, and potentially same thing with Brandon. Curious enough that one spot that's still seeing a decent amount of rain with this, at least for us around locally, looks like around the Beaumont area. They've got a new flash flood warning. I'll show you that here in just a sec. But Sabine Pass is now at about 2 feet below zero. And what do you mean by that? I know it's difficult to say, well, how is that a negative? It means that the level that is normally at here has dipped well below that, meaning all that water is being pushed out, and it'll kind of slosh its way back in and sort of stabilize. But you get the idea. That same thing with the North Jetty over towards the coast. So we still have the tropical or the coastal flood warnings, and that's this area here, shaded all across the Trinity and Galveston Bay, and then slices its way down towards the Brazoria coastline. That is expected to drop by 8, 10 o'clock tonight. Originally, it was going to go until 3 tomorrow afternoon. Obviously, as the conditions change, the tropical storm warnings have been expired across the southeast Texas area here, and then, of course, you see that new flash flood warning. Let me show a quick shot on that. That is just for Beaumont proper. That's till 10 o'clock tonight, as there's still getting a decent amount of rain moving through there. So coastal wise, here's what we're going to be dealing with. It still will stay fairly breezy, I think, through a chunk of the night. Then tomorrow, improvement on that. Tides and winds will fall. The flood issue will be decreasing as well. And the bigger concern, I think, is going to be the surf and the rip currents. I don't see those improving that much until we get probably late tomorrow afternoon, and then we'll start to see the rip current back off as well. And, I want to show this graphic once again, because I think this really kind of tells the story. Now, and here's, I found another nugget for this one too, Frank. So 10 storms, including that one today. That's the all-time record. All of these, not a single one hit Florida. How about that?
Wow, that is amazing.
Right? That's what I thought at that point. Because you think, well, Florida's got to get hit, right? It's basically like that arm that just stick outside of the window that, it's going to be the first thing it hits as they're coming. But nothing. They just.
Because even Sally hit Gulf Shores, Alabama.
Exactly.
Even though Pensacola got all the rain and the flooding. Yeah. So Florida got hit, but not a technical landfall.
Yeah, not a technical landfall, thankfully. And of course, I think the story for us here has been, close calls by a whisker for both, Sally, Laura, and now with Delta. And one of the reasons, at least the last two, and I think, you probably agree with this too, is that we've had the benefit of wind shear, and we've had the benefit of some hot, dry air that's just shaved off the western edge of that. I think that's really kind of played into all three of those storms for us here.
Well, and since you like this kind of trivia, New Orleans, I think, has been in 4 different cones of uncertainty and hasn't gotten a single storm.
And didn't get a single one.
Yeah. Including this one.
I'll tell you what.
It originally was going to New Orleans. This one was.
Yeah. Somebody was at Madame Tussauds, or someone was over at one of the voodoo shops there, just kind of like whiskey.
Maybe it finally is working.
Yeah.
I need you guys next time we play Jeopardy.
I know. You're on my team.
I'm going to ace the storm category. Frank, 2005.
Yeah, 28 storms.
28 named storm, right?
Correct.
Which 28. Was a record.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so
you're going to ask me about this one?
We're at 26.
This is 26.
Yes.
Right? Because
And it's early October.
Technically, hurricane season is not done yet.
Oh no, November 30th.
Right.
And we'll get more. There's another little yellow X in the Atlantic right now.
So you're saying there's a chance?
There's more than a chance. we have.
Let's set a record. It's 2020, baby.
That's right.
But our season generally ends now.
Okay.
I mean, generally, for our part of the Gulf, this should be it.
Well, but it's because of all these dry fronts, correct?
Right. Well, this is what protected us from this trough of low pressure, and we got a front coming in Monday.
But in terms of the temperature of the basin out there, where do we stand?
Well, you know, it's below 80 right here.
Okay.
So, and that's another reason why this storm sort of fell apart a little bit.
Right.
But down to the south, 86. I mean, when it was a Cat 4, just yesterday, it was over 86 degree water. And the Caribbean will remain warm. It's always warm. The only thing that really keeps the Caribbean from having hurricanes all year is the wind shear. To be honest, I mean, the Caribbean that's why everybody wants to go to the Caribbean. It's beautiful all year long.
Who needs a vacation?
Right.
I'm just saying.
It's
And if you remember
2020,
with
I
this
think
one-
we all do.
Right.
If you remember with this one too, Chris, it went from a Category 1 to a Cat 4 in about
No time.
12, 14
Yeah,
hours.
right.
And it was that warm
just
water.
Overnight.
boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
Harvey
hit
did
that
the same
90-degree
thing
water.
back
Right.
in 17. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was nothing on Wednesday morning, and it was a Cat 4 on Friday evening.
Well, the good thing is this is sort of becoming a half-a-cane just because of,
point.
right? Well, because of what the wind is doing to the bottom part of it.
Yeah, it's not very well formed now, so that's good. This is all being sheared apart. You see how it loses its circular identity? It's just kind of all blotchy looking. It's sort of like a Rorschach. So I don't know what you see when you see that, but I see a hurricane that's trying to fall apart.
Right.
Thanks to that, you know, these winds too, these strong southwest winds, that's helped. There's the high that was directing it right there, and then this system came in and said, no, you're not coming to Texas.
Hey, just got a quick update too from Lake Charles, where our Brandon Walker was. You saw they had to kind of go in to get out of the wind.
Right.
The last report, this was about 20 minutes ago, they were getting 72-mile-an-hour wind gusts in Lake Charles.
They were getting slapped by it.
Yeah, they were getting
no
pounded
doubt.
pretty good.
We saw that with Jonathan Martinez, too.
Yep.
Well, there you have it.
Well, I know. You know, it's been something. I'm glad that it is moving up and moving out and doing so quickly. That, you know, another differentiating factor between Delta and Laura is that Delta has her track shoes on, so at least she's going up and she's getting out, which is great. Jonathan Martinez has been in Jennings, Louisiana. Jonathan, we assume things are much calmer now than when we last saw you. Or not.
They really are. The rain has let up at this point. No, they have. The rain has let up. The wind has let up. Well, there it goes. It gushed just the same way it did last time. And, you know, as we've been saying all night, there's not a lot of people out here, but there are just a very few that decided to go ahead and ride it out. I'm joined by one of them right now. Mike Decor, come on over. Talk to us. You've got a flower shop here right in downtown.
Yes, sir, we do. We've been having this flower shop for about 6 or 7 years, and it's kind of a safe haven for us. You know, we all live in a pretty well-built homes, but this is a old brick building that's seen a lot of tornadoes and hurricanes and have survived, so we come here for our safe haven.
So just about 6 weeks ago, y'all went through Hurricane Laura. Describe to us what that was like.
We live about 10 miles east of here. We've had some roof damage on one of my daughter's mobile homes. Few shingles here and there on my home and my daughter's home, but other than that, pretty much guy was able to get out pretty much unscathed without a whole lot of damage, thank the Lord.
So today we're talking about Hurricane Delta. What do you think about this one so far and the reason y'all chose to stay?
Chose to stay basically, I guess, because of leaving and going to Houston was an option, but a 6-hour to 8-hour drive just to go 4 hours down the road is something we decided not to do. And my wife is a hospital employee, so she is a essential worker that must be here. So that had a lot to do with our decision too. So if the hospital calls, she has to be on the front lines. So
talk to us about tonight, this hurricane, what it is that you all have seen and heard.
Well, I'm 53 years old and I've ridden out a few of them in my time. And I can say by far this was probably the scariest one. You know, ridden out some in 16 and Lily, and I think it was 05 maybe. Just scary, but not, this one was, for some reason, had a little different feeling to it. But it is what it is.
At one point we did see some of the awning pieces there swinging. Talk to us about any damage that y'all sustained.
Besides the awning, I think we've gotten out of it pretty unscathed without a whole lot of damage. Spoke with my family who are still at our home. My daughter is still at home. We live next door to each other, and again, lost a few more shingles and some siding and stuff, but other than that, everything is still intact, and by the blessing of the Lord, buddy, we're gonna make it again. So
Mike, I appreciate it so much. Thanks
Yes.
for taking the time for us.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate you.
All right, and there's one of the very few individuals who decided to ride it out, at least that we were able to find here in downtown. But again, as he described it, you didn't really know what to expect, so that aspect of it made it scary. But the good news is, thus far, we're not seeing a lot of structural damage as perhaps we've seen in the past, just 6 weeks ago with Hurricane Laura, guys.
And he brings up a valid point when you think about evacuating to Houston, what should be a 4-hour drive, Dominique, as we wrap up here. You think about, we saw the video of I-10 and it was bumper to bumper traffic, right? And he says what should be a 4-hour drive was taking people 6 to 8 hours. He said, I'd rather just ride it out here at home.
Sure, and a lot of people probably did.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, our coverage of the aftermath of this hurricane continues tonight on KPRC Channel 2 News at 10.
We will have live team coverage all across Texas and Louisiana. We appreciate you being with us, and we'll see you on air at 10 o'clock tonight.